Psalm chapter number 8. Brother Jeff bought the Prison Prevention Department a book, Pearls for Paradise. Gave it to us for Christmas. And I'll be honest with you, I read the first couple days of it, and I thought, and growing up in a Christian school and being taught creation, I thought this was going to be a little bit boring. It's a devotional guide for the year. But I kept with it, and you say, well, why'd you keep with it? Because any good book gets better after the first 2 or 3 chapters. And so I've stuck with it, and it's been interesting reading some of this. And I'll read chapter 8 of Psalms, and then I'm going to come back and just bring in some of these things that I've learned out of that book and in dealing with this, and just to show us how good God is. Psalm chapter number 8 and verse number 1 says, O Lord, our Lord, how excellent is thy name in all the earth, who has set thy glory above the heavens. Out of the mouth of babes and sucklings thou hast ordained strength because of thine enemies, that thou mightest still the enemy and the avenger. Verse number 3, When I consider thy heavens and the works of thy fingers, the moon and the stars which thou hast ordained, what is man that thou art mindful of him, and the son of man that thou visitest him? For thou hast made him a little lower than the angels, and hast crowned him with glory and honor. Thou hast made him to have dominion over the works of thy hands. Thou hast put all things under his feet, all sheep and oxen, yea, the beasts of the field, the fowl of the air, the fish of the sea, and whatsoever passes through the paths of the sea. O Lord, our Lord, how excellent is thy name in all the earth. In reading of this book, I'm going to go back to verse number 3. When I consider the heavens, the works of thy fingers, the moon and the stars which thou hast ordained. Yes, the psalmist is talking about the heavens and the planetary and everything, but I began to, as I was thinking about devotions this morning and things of that nature, I began to go back on that book and just remind, you say, what was you doing? I was considering God's creation. I was thinking about some of the things that the Lord has done, and I just want to give you some of the things that just kind of, they're just one little page things, and it just tells a little bit about this. But one of them is the killer whales. When they go hunting, they'll circle the herring and get them in a bunch, and they'll have, and they call it a herring ball. And what they'll do is then they'll get down at the bottom, and they'll rotate as a team. They'll kind of rotate out, and they'll feed off the stragglers towards the bottom because they've got them all bunched up. And you say, well, what is that? That's how good God is. Because and again, everything that goes through on this book, it stops and says, and how does the evolutionist prove this? How does the evolutionist say this? How can this happen? And it's just one of those things, and you look at it and you go, well, how did the killer whales know that they needed to tag team on this? And how did they know that the herring, if they would swim around them, would bunch up like this? And you say, well, it's God. It's the divine creator that programmed both the predator and the prey. Right. You say, why? Because he had to program the predator on how to do it, and he programmed the prey on how to respond so that the predator could have lunch. Just some thoughts there, and so God did that, and that was just one of the things. And another one, I was, again, these are just little tidbits, but it makes you stop and go, When was the last time we looked at some of these things? And the next one that I was thinking about and just kind of considering here this morning, I was reading about the Venus flytrap. It's got 2 little hair triggers that the fly has to go down in and trigger before it will close. And you say, well, who did that, God? And you say, what are you doing? I'm going back. When was the last time we just stopped? And every time I read in this book, and I try to read it on daily and get the devotion of it for the day and the thought, and just because it's interesting. But you consider the works of his hands. And again, the question was asked in the book, how long did it take, evolutionist, how long did it take before the Venus flytrap realized it needed to have 2 little hair triggers? It was a divine creator that, again, created that Venus flytrap to have those hair triggers in there when the fly or the bug would get down, and then to have the enzymes needed to break down the fly in the enzymes. I was reading one this morning about the snake and the venom, and how he's got the fangs and they're in the right spot, and his jaw is spring loaded so that he could hit. And not only are the fangs there, but the venom and the two different toxins that were there. One of them's, if I remember correctly, a hemotoxin, and one of them's a neurotoxin, depending on which snake you have. But just to be spring loaded, and the fangs set in the right spot so that when it attacked and when it would sink its fangs in there, that the venom would come out. You say, well, I don't like, the only snake I like is a dead snake. And I'll agree with you, but God still created them for a purpose and a plan. And He had it. And again, it goes back to, may I say it this way? Before Genesis 1:1, I believe God had that plan. Yeah. That when I step out and I create these things, these are the way I'm going to create them. This is the design that I've got in mind when I create this. And you say, why? That's what any good human being will do also. Before they ever dig the first hole, they'll survey what they have and say, okay, this is the finished product. In today's society, we'll pull it up on a computer and make a scale model of it and 3D and be able to take the roof off of it and look down inside and be able to put furniture in, all before we ever dig the first hole. And I believe God in His providence and in His omnipresence and omniscience and all-knowingness, before He ever said, let there be light, He already knew it all. Yeah. He had it planned. And I thank God that He did. And then I was thinking about this when I read this one also this morning, just kind of catching up a little bit on it. But it talked about some of the sedimentary layers that are folded over. And again, it goes back and says, evolutionists, how do you prove this without rocks cracking? And they said it was the Great Flood. That while those sedimentary layers were still pliable, they were folded over in the layers. And you think about this as man cuts the roads through the rocks. I can't tell you how many times I've either ridden or as I'm driving by and glance over at those rocks. When I go up I-75 just south of the Tennessee state line there, I can't help but as I'm trying to pay attention to the road, but as I glance over at some of those mountains and some of those cuts and those rocks, I look at that and go, that's the flood. And just how awesome is that rock laying the way it's laid. You say, what is that? That's a divine creator that created everything. And if you look at that layer of that mountain, and it's just there north of Jellicoe, right around in that area, you look at it and you have to say, number one, there had to be a flood. You say, why? Because the evidence is right there in the cut. Yeah. What pushes that way? Because it's odd. It's an odd layer. And you have to say, there gives no other explanation. And you have to say there's a God. The next time we look out, and one of the things that I like about coming to the office, the way I come to the office, is I come over the hill. And it's a beautiful view out that way. I get almost the cabin view every morning, so to speak, just a little bit further down the road. But I see out and I see the mountains. I see the hand of God. When was the last time we just stopped and considered what God's done? The birds, the trees, just creation. But just to stop and consider, Lord, you did that. How marvelous are thy works. Appreciate your time this morning as we as we go about our business today. Stop and consider what God has done in His creation. Amen. Have a good day.